Hi, I want to take this opportunity to share something that God has been showing me. The beginning of March, I was seeking the Lord. It was almost like I was in a place where, okay, God, what are you up to right now? I'm not hearing properly. There's something it's like I was in a block. But then the Lord began to show me some things about the significance of the timing of where we are at right now, and how that in this season we have to hear differently. And so I began to do some research regarding this to time of the year in the Bible, etc. And I found out a few things. But first of all, I heard I just couldn't get the words harvest and inheritance off of my heart, and I just said, I know that you're trying to say something, and so I began to do some studying and some research into it, and I found out that first of all, that Noah's Ark, at this time of the year, Noah's Ark had rested on Mount Ararat after being afloat for a year. That there was something significant about the timing of this coming month. And also that this was the time that Israel crossed the Red Sea. And they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, led by a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. And the providence of that, for them to be led that way. But when it came time, 40 years later, for them to inherit the land, they had to be led a different way. And so I was curious because somehow in the middle of it, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire disappeared. And so when they were getting ready to cross the Jordan River, which was 40 years later, it was also at this time of the year. And I'm going, okay, God, what are you showing me? See, they had to be led a different way. They had to learn God in a different capacity. And so he gave them the Ark of the Covenant, and they had to follow the Ark across into their inheritance. And so they had to follow covenant. In other words, they had to follow God, the God who keeps his promises, the God who keeps his plans. And so they followed into the promised land that way. And by this time, they had come to a place of maturity where there were no longer belly achers and complainers. They had grown up, and you see, the Bible talks about sons receiving their inheritance. It doesn't say children have a right to their inheritance. In Galatians, you'll study that, but it's sons that get to receive it. And so by this time they had matured, so they could go over into the promised land. And so when it comes to getting our inheritance, they had to be led a different way. And so I started reading up on the story where Joshua led them into the promised land at that time. And it says that the manna had stopped, and they had to, it was the first time they could eat from the fruit of the land. So it was almost like it was at the time of the Passover, and it was like they could eat the first fruits of the land. So that kind of tweaked me a little bit. And so I began to just go into a time where I just felt like I said, God, we can't be led except by you. Everything we do will be fruitless unless we're being led by you. And it was like, Lord, we can't even get healed except by you. And so it was that time where I was at a place where I just said, Lord, I just need you. I just need you. I need you to show me. And so he began to talk about other things that happened. And I found out that Ruth left the land of Moab and came into Israel and was gleaning at this time of the year. And at this time of the year, it's the barley harvest. There are 3 harvests that are main harvests listed in the Bible. There are other crops, but these 3 are significant. And the first one is the barley harvest, which occurs around Passover. The second one is the wheat harvest, which occurs around Pentecost. And the last one is the Feast of the Tabernacles, and that is the fruit harvest. And so I began to study about the barley. And so here's Ruth. She's gleaning at the sides of the field during the barley harvest, and she meets her kinsman redeemer. And so we find out too that Jesus was crucified at the time of the barley harvest. And so we're looking at different things that happened. And so I began to go before the Lord with all of this stuff. And I just said, God, I want so much to be obedient to you. I want so much to be at a place. And I realized that this month is a significant month. And it's recorded as the first month of the year in Israel's time. And so I just began to say, Lord, what is it? And I felt like he was calling me to give a first fruits offering. And I just right away, I just wanted to just do it and just sow into it, just out of obedience. Because you see, the harvest is all about people. It's all about souls. It's all about blessings. And he says, if at the first part of the year, if you that which you offer, if it's holy, then the whole works is holy. And so when the first fruits is given, it means that everything else, the harvest is guaranteed, but it means that the rest of the harvest is also holy. And so I looked up the symbol of barley, and barley is actually prophetically a symbol of poverty and lowliness and low reputation. And I thought it's significant that Jesus was crucified in the barley harvest. And I thought, he's the firstborn. He's the first fruits. In 1 Corinthians 15, it talks about him being the first fruits. And he's the firstborn. And that indicates there's secondborn. That indicates that there's more to follow. And so here was this, in Genesis 3, the seed that would crush the enemy's head, that would wound. And so this is what we're looking at. And here's Jesus, the firstborn, and the first one that would resurrect from the dead. And it says that he was like this barley seed, which is, not it was like a symbol of lowliness. And that's what he was. He was despised. He was forsaken, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He had no stately form or majesty. And he's just like that grain of barley. And so I just pray to the Lord, and I felt like we needed to give an offering, like a first fruits offering. And there was something about the significance of doing it now, the first part of the year. And so my heart was stirred to do this. And so I shared it with the rest of the national team, and they felt it was right too. And so I'm putting it before you as well, that there's something about the significance of the rest of this year, that if we give this now, that we will see God's faithfulness. This covenant-keeping God will help us build his kingdom for the rest of the year. And so I just lay this before you and ask you to prayerfully consider joining us. You don't have to. It's not like it's a First Fruits is different. It says that you take, I think Remy's going to be doing some teaching on this, but I felt like the first has to be done, and that secures the rest of the harvest. It also makes the rest of the harvest holy. But it's also an offering that says, I'm in it for the whole thing, God. I'm in it for the long run. And so I bless you as you consider this.